Welcome back to Legalese 123, where we are covering cases across America. Welcome back to Legalese 123. I'm your host, Missy K. I hope everybody is doing well on these crazy days between Christmas and New Year's. Never know what time it is, what day it is, etc. Well, it is Tuesday, December the 30th. Yeah, that is correct. I hope everyone is doing well. Hope your weather is doing well as well. We've been getting some snow here and there, which is nice because we don't really have anywhere to go, which is also very nice, but we do have to still shovel ourselves out. What are you going to do, right? Well, what's going on these days? Well, there's not really much going on in the news, in the courts, etc., because everybody's sort of on a sleepy holiday. There's some things trickling out here and there, but nothing really explosive or newsworthy, right? I'm still working on the sidebars for Karen Reed. We only have a couple more left in this batch that has been given out. I'll be giving those out again in the next couple of days. So I thought what we would do in these sleepy days is talk about things that are in the news that are pending that you may not be aware of. And so what are we going to talk about today? Today, I've been holding on to this one for quite a while. So today we're going to talk about the Tik Tok Psychic. Have you heard of the Tik Tok Psychic who accused the University of Idaho history professor for unaliving the 4 Idaho students? Well, you're in for a treat because I have the latest and greatest information. So, just as a recap here, at the University of Idaho, unfortunately, sadly, there were 4 victims who were unalived on the early morning hours of November 13th of 2022. They were Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin. They were unalived in an off-campus apartment just steps away from the university practically. And so what ended up happening? Well, in the chaotic early hours of trying to figure out who had unalived these students because it was the unmanageable in the sleepy town of Idaho, Tik Tok Psychic Ashley Goulard, who I'm only going to say her name once because I don't want to give any credence to her, had posted on TikTok that she had solved the crime. That's right. She was the internet sleuth who was the armchair detective who decided that she was going to go ahead and state that, unfortunately, that Rebecca Schofield, who is the assistant professor of the history of the University of Idaho, was the killer. And so we're going to go over some of the filings as to what transpired. But as you may know, Brian Koberger was eventually arrested in the case. He was arrested on December 30th of 2022. So the events happened on November 13th. It wasn't until about 6 weeks later that Koberger had been arrested. In the meantime, Tik Tok Psychic had posted thousands and thousands of videos blaming Rebecca Schofield for the unaliving of these 4 students. Eventually, Koberger then pled guilty before his trial. He ended up receiving 4 life sentences without being able to appeal. So then, what did Rebecca Schofield do? So Rebecca Schofield filed a defamation lawsuit on November 21st, 2022. So these were days before they arrested Koberger. Koberger wasn't arrested until December 30th of 2022. But Rebecca had enough. Tik Tok Psychic had blasted her information all over the internet and stating that she had done it. So Rebecca Schofield then filed a defamation suit against TikToker because she had stated, hey, she'd sent her a cease and desist, stop this. And TikToker doubled and tripled down and continued with her TikTok psychicness and kept embellishing the story. So we're going to read Rebecca's claims against TikToker. So on November 20th, 2022, four students at the University of Idaho were murdered at their home near the campus. The tragedy has garnered attention and inflicted great sorrow throughout the university, the state, and the country. Defendant, TikToker, a purported internet sleuth, decided to use the community's pain for her online self promotion. She has posted many videos on TikTok falsely stating that the plaintiff, Rebecca Schofield, a professor at the university, participated in the murders because she was romantically involved with one of the victims. TikTok's statements are false. Professor Schofield did not participate in the murders. She had never been to any of the she had never met any of the victims, let alone entered into a romantic relationship with them. TikTok Psychic videos have been viewed millions of times, amplifying TikTok's online persona at the expense of Professor Schofield's reputation. Professor Schofield now sues TikTok Psychic for defamation. So we'll talk about the parties, the jurisdiction, and the venue. So this is very important. The jurisdiction and venue is because Schofield lives in Idaho. She filed this lawsuit in Idaho. She is a resident of Idaho. TikTok Psychic is not. We'll get into that later, why that matters. All right, so the factual allegations. In the early mornings of November 13th, 2022, four students at the University of Idaho were tragically unalived in their home near the campus. It is a tragedy that has gripped the entire university community, forever affected the students' families, brought tremendous sorrow throughout the state of Idaho, and garnered national media attention. To respect the privacy of the victims and the families, this complaint refers to them as their initials. But as we know, the case is resolved. We just stated who the victims were. It's okay to go ahead and state their names. Professor Schofield was not in Moscow, Idaho when the unaliving occurred. She and her husband were in Portland, Oregon, visiting friends. They stayed in a hotel, checking out in the morning hours of the 13th after the unaliving had occurred. They drove from Portland to Moscow, a drive for more than 5 hours, arriving after law enforcement officers had discovered the unalivings. Professor Schofield did not commit or in any way participate in the unaliving of the four students. Professor Schofield has taught at the university since January 2016. She became the chair of the history of the department in July of 2021. None of the four students who were unalived ever took any classes from Professor Schofield. Although the University of Idaho is a relatively small university, she does not recall ever meeting any one of the students. She has also never met TikTok Psychic. TikTok Psychic promotes herself on Amazon and TikTok as an internet sleuth that has solved high-profile unsolved murders by consulting tarot cards and performing other readings to obtain information about the unalivings. She has purportedly been able to solve the unalivings of a musician's, I'm going to butcher this name, Kershnik Kari Ball, aka Takeoff, Shaquilla Robinson, Tiffany Valente, Kevin Samuels, and the November unalivings at the University of Idaho. TikTok is a social media platform through which persons can post short stories, typically no more than 1 or 2 minutes. TikToks primarily are recorded by a person using their own cell phone to record a video, and then posting it through the person's account on the TikTok platform. Individuals with the TikTok accounts can review other people's TikTok accounts, can post comments on the various TikToks, and can repost other TikTok users' posts. On or about November 22nd, 2022, TikTok Psychic began posting TikTok videos about the November unaliving at the University of Idaho. She asserted that the unalivings had some history with one or more of the victims, and that the unaliver was someone who previously was involved with one of the victims, possibly an ex. On information and belief, TikTok Psychic has never been to Moscow, Idaho, or to any other location in Idaho, and that she had no bias to make factual statements about any of the events that had ever occurred there. On or about November 24th, 2022, TikTok Psychic posted 6 TikTok videos to her account. in which she falsely stated that Professor Schofield, chair of the history department, was responsible for the 4 students' deaths. 2 of the TikToks directly and falsely stated that Professor Schofield ordered the execution of the 4 students. 3 of the TikToks either falsely implied or directly stated that Professor Schofield had been involved in a relationship with the then murder student, she's saying Kaylee Gonzalez. 3 of the TikToks posted to her website on November 24th, 2022, also used Professor Schofield's photo from the University of Idaho website. Upon information and belief, Tik Tok Psychic did not receive permission to use Professor Schofield's official university photograph. Tik Tok Psychic's November 24th, 2022 TikToks were not based on any facts or any information known to Tik Tok Psychic. Her statements that Professor Schofield ordered the murders and that Professor Schofield had relationship with one of the victims are false. On the following day, November 25th, 2022, Tik Tok Psychic posted an additional 5 TikTok videos falsely alleging that Professor Schofield ordered and planned the unaliving of the 4 students. In the 3 videos, Tik Tok Psychic falsely stated that Professor Schofield and a student at the University of Idaho, JD, together planned the murders of the 4 students. I believe JD is related to one of the anyways, I'm not going to speculate. I'm not exactly sure who JD is. I'm sure people know who he is. Professor Schofield has not met student JD and has never had him in class. She never partnered with him on anything. She did not partner with him to unalive the 4 University of Idaho students. Tik Tok Psychic's November 25th TikToks were not based on any facts or any information known to TikToker. Her statements that Professor Schofield partnered with another student to plan or carry out the murders are false. November 28th, 2022, Tik Tok Psychic posted 6 TikTok videos in which she falsely alleged, either by explicitly stating so or posting TikToks with her videos, that Professor Schofield participated in or was otherwise responsible for the murders of the 4 University of Idaho students, and that she did so because her prior relationships with Kaylee Gonzalez. In one other video, she wrote words Rebecca Schofield's thoughts as she ordered the murders of the University of Idaho students. Tik Tok Psychic's November 28th, 2022 TikToks were not based on any facts or any information known to TikToker. Her statements that Professor Schofield ordered or in any way participated in the unalivings or that she was involved in a personal relationship with Kaylee are false. November 28th, 2022, TikTokers had been directly informed that her TikTok videos alleging that Professor Schofield was involved in the murders were false. Nevertheless, she continued posting her TikTok videos, aware that they were false. In one TikTok video, she wrote, "I don't care what you all say." JD and Rebecca Schofield unalived the 4 victims. Rebecca was the one to initiate the plan and hired JD. On November 29th, 2022, Professor Schofield, through counsel, sent Tik Tok Psychic a cease and desist letter informing her that TikTok videos stating that the professor was involved in the manner or that she had a romantic relationship with Kaylee were false and defamatory, demanding that she take down her defamatory videos, demanding that she cease making such videos, and demanding that she issue an apology to Professor Schofield. Did that stop TikToker? No. TikToker did not stop posting defamatory TikToks, falsely stating that Professor Schofield was involved in the unalivings or that she had a romantic relationship with Kaylee. On November 29th, 2022 and November 30th, 2022, TikToker posted additional TikTok videos falsely stating that Professor Schofield was involved in ordering and directing execution of the unaliving of the 4 students. She was not. Since December 1st, 2022, TikToker has continued making false statements in her TikTok videos, falsely asserting Professor Schofield's involvement in the unaliving of the 4 University of Idaho students and falsely stating that Professor Schofield was involved in ordering the unalivings and was present in the Moscow, Idaho to ensure that they were carried out. She falsely stated that Rebecca Schofield is going to prison for the unaliving of the 4 University of Idaho students, whether you like it or not. I am not worried about Rebecca Schofield suing me because she will be using her resources to fight the murder cases. She ordered the execution of the murders, and that Professor Schofield motive in ordering the murders and finding someone to carry it out was because she was dating a student. Professor Schofield decided to unalive the students because Kaylee wanted to take a break in the relationship. Professor Schofield was going to help the person she hired to carry out the murders achieve the person's dream of playing on the University of Idaho tennis team. JD killed the 4 students because Becca told me to. Sorry, kind of phony. And that she said that the spokesman, which is an Idaho review newspaper, was protecting the killer in the article suggesting the TikTokers were false. As the TikTokers' prior TikToks falsely stated that Professor Schofield was involved in the order of the unalivings. December TikToks have no basis in fact. They were false. Persons with TikTok accounts can comment on the TikTok posts of the others they follow. Many TikTok users warned TikToker that her statements were false and that she was defaming the professor, among others. TikToker did not stop making false and defamatory TikToks despite being warned of their falsity multiple times by persons commenting on her TikToks. Equally concerning, other TikTok users commented that they believed the TikToker's psychic's false statements that the Professor Schofield ordered the murders, and that Professor Schofield was romantically involved, and that she had wondered when this professor would be brought to justice. On December 8th, 2022, Professor Schofield, through counsel, sent a second cease and desist letter, enclosing the first and again demanding that TikToker take her defamatory posts and that TikToker stop making defamatory TikToks. Rather than changing her conduct, TikToker made TikToks showing the cease and desist letter, acknowledging that she had received it, and explaining that if the professor, through counsel, believed that TikToker was making false statements, counsel would need to file an actual legal documents in a federal court asking me to remove it. A judge will then determine if it needed to be removed. Also, after receiving the cease and desist letter, TikToker on December 18th and 19th posted more than 20 new TikTok videos falsely stating that Professor Schofield was involved with KG and that Professor Schofield's motive for the unaliving was to keep KG from making their relationship public. TikToker has continued to publish false statements about the professor on TikTok despite having no basis for making the statements, and despite being notified numerous times of her statements are false. Professor has never met TikToker. She does not know her. She does not know why TikToker picked her to repeatedly falsely accuse her of ordering the tragic murders and being involved with one of the victims. Professor does not know that she has been harmed by the false TikToks and false statement. Oh, she does know. She does know that she's been harmed. Like, she obviously is. She's filing a lawsuit. All right. TikTokers' false TikToks have damaged the professor's reputation. They have caused her significant emotional distress. She fears for her life and the lives of her family members. She has incurred costs, including costs to install a security system, security cameras at her residence. She fears that TikTok's false statements may motivate someone to cause harm to her and her family members. So, first claim for relief. Professor Schofield alleges and incorporates by reference all prior paragraphs in this complaint as set forth herein. One moment, please. Okay, in her TikTok post between November 24th and the present, because she didn't stop, TikToker made false and defamatory statements implicating Professor in the unaliving of the 4 students. She'd made false statements. She knew her statements were false because she had no knowledge about anything that happened in Moscow in and around November 13th. Now, mind you, during this time, the police were very, very tight-lipped about who their suspect was. They wanted to make sure they built a case against Koberger before they went ahead and arrested him. So they released very, very little information. And in fact, once the unalivings had happened, it wasn't until 3 days later that the police made a public statement. The residents of Moscow were very concerned because again, it's a sleepy town. Nothing really ever happens there. And nobody really locks their doors. So during this time frame, they were panicked. Is there a killer on the loose? Who are they coming for? Why these students? So rumors and speculations and innuendos were flying left, right, and center. Who would do this? What's the motive, etc.? And are they coming for anybody else? So when this TikToker posts these things, people grasp onto it because they want to know what happened and who was involved. And so people, especially outside of the community, want to know what happened. And they don't know the inner workings of the university. They don't know who's who and what's what. They believe that the professor was somehow involved. So you could see where somebody has falsely accused you of this high profile case that is currently unfolding in real time. TikToker lives in Texas, by the way, and she's making defamatory statements about a professor who lives and works at the university where these students were unalived. So you can imagine the professor's horror and disbelief that somebody has accused her of these horrible things that she did not do. And now she needs to protect herself and her family from, unfortunately, other people in the world who believe anything that's said or written or talked about, that they might then do something to harm them. And they've sent 2 cease and desists to her to have her stop and take these down and apologize. And TikToker just doubles and triples down and continues the harassment. So false TikToks defamed the professor because they were viewed millions of times and widely reposted by other TikTok users, resulting in the professor's name being likely linked to unaliving in basic internet searches. As a result of TikToker's false statements, the professor's reputation was injured, and that she was subject to online ridicule, threats from TikToker's online commenters. She also fears that she and her family will be the target of physical violence. The online nature of TikToker's false statements continues to harm and damage the professor. TikToker's TikTok account has more than 100,000 followers, and some of her TikToks defaming Professor Schofield have 2.5 million likes, indicating that the person has viewed the video and liked it. Professor has been damaged by TikToker's false statements. Her reputation has been tarnished. She has suffered extreme emotional distress from the constant public attention and the ongoing online conversation regarding her role in the unaliving, as falsely alleged by the TikTok Psychic. The second claim for relief. In TikToker's post between November 24th and to this date of the complaint, remember this was filed on the 22nd of December, TikToker made false and defamatory statements that Professor Schofield was or had been romantically involved with one of the students, Kaylee. As TikToker statements involve moral turpitude, a professor being involved with a student, that they are pro se defamatory in nature. TikToker knew her statements were false because she had no knowledge about anything that happened in Moscow, Idaho, or at the University of Idaho. She does not know Professor Schofield and did not know Kaylee Gonzalez. TikToker further knew her statements were false because they were not based on any facts, because persons commenting on her posts told her that they were false, and because professors twice sent TikToker a cease and desist letter regarding the false and defamatory posts by TikToker, continued thereafter to post additional TikTok videos with false statements. TikToker's false TikToks defamed the professor because they were viewed millions of times and widely reposted by other TikTok users. TikToker's false statements defamed the professor's professional's reputation, career at the University of Idaho, as university policy prohibits faculty members from having a romantic relationship with the university students. As a result of TikToker's false statements, Professor's reputation was injured, and she was the subject to online ridicule, threats from TikToker's online commenters. Professor has been damaged by TikTok's false statements, her reputation has been tarnished, and she has suffered extreme emotional distress from the constant public attention and the ongoing online conversation discussing the false relationship with a student, as falsely alleged by the TikToker. So she's seeking all of these things. She's seeking, attorney's fees. She demands a jury trial. And that is what her lawyers then that is her defamation suit. Well, TikToker doubles and triples and quadruples down. Not only did Professor then send her, she's like, okay, you want me to sue you? Here you go, I sued you. Now, TikToker has responded, but she doesn't have a lawyer. She is doing this pro se. And here is TikToker's response. As I said, TikToker lives in Texas. This is not her current address, by the way, so I'm not in any way doxing her. Might be her email. All right. Ashley Gillard, who is TikToker, is in opposition to counter-defended. So, not only is she responding to it, she's also countersuing. And not when she's countersuing, she is not just countersuing the professor, she's countersuing everybody. And we'll get into that in just a second. And she cites a whole bunch of things, which is really interesting, but there's no factual basis. Okay. Counterclaimant TikToker asserts that the statements she made in the factual allegations of the countercomplaint, to include Rebecca Schofield's orders, planned, initiated, and ensured the execution of the unaliving of the 4 Idaho students, are subsistently true. Now, mind you, this was filed on June 27th, 2023. They already have arrested Koberger at this time. They are starting the trial proceedings, meaning motions and stuff are going back and forth about whether or not he's gotten a fair grand jury indictment, and then he talks about whether or not he wants to change a venue. There's a lot going on in the Koberger case at this time, but the wheels are moving for him to go to trial by June 27th of 2023, as she posts this. All right. Given the full benefit of the doubt that the factual allegations in the countercomplaint is true, the counterclaims filed are merited state claims for relief and are worthy of jurisdiction. So this is where she continues her harassment, really. Rebecca Schofield planned, initiated, ordered, and executed the unaliving of the 4 University Idaho students who were killed in Moscow, Idaho on November 13th. Professor went undetected by the Moscow police, Idaho State Police, and the FBI detectives who were assigned to the case. On November 24th, 2022, TikToker used her psychic abilities, spiritual acuity, and investigative skills to uncover the motive and details that led to the murder of the students. She posted her findings on social media and reported it to the FBI tip line, which I'm really sure they were really happy to receive because they had nothing better to do than to find the real killer, right? When I think of the real killer, I think of Loophole Lawyer, number 1. And number 2, I think of, the Scooby-Doo episodes where they unmask the person. All right. To stop TikToker's information from being taken seriously and to silence her, The professor and her attorneys, and she lists all them, filed a lawsuit against TikToker with 2 frivolous claims of defamation. Professor initiated the lawsuit with full knowledge that she was responsible for the unaliving of the 4 students and with the intent to harass, embarrass, humiliate, and discredit TikToker and her spiritual practice. The attorneys worked in concert on the lawsuit. Together, they failed to exercise reasonable due diligence to ensure the truth of the claims against TikToker before filing under oath that the claims are true. Instead, they worked together with the professor to harass, embarrass, humiliate, and discredit TikToker and to defraud her out of millions of dollars under the color of law using and abusing attorney and judicial immunity. Sorry. In their legal filings, attorneys collectively defamed TikToker as a purported online sleuth who used the unalivings of the 4 students to gain money and followers. The truth is, TikToker did not make any money from TikTok or in any way. You just said that they swindled you out of millions of dollars. Defraud her out of millions of dollars, but you didn't make any money. Okay. Did not make any money from TikTok or in any way from reporting her findings. Instead, she lost followers, lost revenue. You just said you didn't make any money. Okay. Suffered financial, mental, and business repercussions due to the false statements. Rebecca Schofield's attorney, Wendy Olson, made it about her and her multinational press releases and from the filing of the frivolous lawsuit against her. The truth is, oh my gosh. Again, you can't make this up. The truth is, Professor is a serial killer who successfully evaded suspicion of her crimes for months with the help of attorney Wendy Olson and her other attorneys. By defaming TikToker, by insulting spiritual practices like tarot readings, by mocking psychic intuition, denouncing spiritual connection and mediumship as inauthentic. The professor and her attorneys deterred professor from criminal investigation. People, we are in June 27th of 2023. We are about 7 months, give or take a couple of days or weeks, 7 months and about 6 weeks when the unalivings happened, and she's making these statements. In addition to the frivolous lawsuit filed against her and being defamed on a multinational news media, TikToker was harassed. Hundreds of fake TikTok pages were created, commented on TikToker's social media posts to call her crazy and attack anyone who attempted to defend her. TikToker blocked those pages and more were created. The intent was to cause TikToker's mental health to be questioned to prevent her statements about the professor from being taken seriously. As a result of their tactical strategy to destroy TikToker to prevent the professor from suspicion and investigation of a quadruple murder, they collectively violated a multitude of TikTokers' rights that resulted in at least 11 merited claims for relief for these reasons as set forth more fully below. TikToker respectfully requests the court to deny counterclaim defendant's motion to dismiss. Okay. So, just an FYI, when all of these happened and they did the cease and desist and TikToker continued with her defaming the professor, TikTok banned her account, right? But guess what, people? You can make another account. So I'm sure that she did. I'm sure that she has. Now, whether or not she still continues to defame the professor is unknown because I don't follow that. But I'm sure she's made another account. Oh, but let's continue on because you can't make this up. Counter-defendant professor and her attorneys asked the court to dismiss TikToker's counterclaim. failure to state a claim report which relief can be granted. Their argument is that TikTokers' counterclaims are implausible and that the court should use common sense and dismiss the counterclaims. More specifically, they're asking the court to debunk spirituality, mediumship, psychic abilities, and intuitive acuity as implausible. Doing so puts the court in the position to decide whether a spiritual practice is authentic. In the United States, citizens have the free will to choose to participate in their religious and spiritual practices. It is guaranteed by the First Amendment of the United States Constitution. The First Amendment provides that Congress make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting its free exercise. So, is she saying that she is a religious entity? And if so, are you filed under a religious entity? I think not. All right. So, Rebecca Schofield and her attorneys have already compromised TikTokers' reputation, time and mental health in social media, businesses, finance, income, and overall livelihood to prevent TikToker from being properly investigated for the unaliving of the 4 University of Idaho students. Now, they're asking the court to compromise a multi-billion-dollar industry, the metaphysical industry, and to compromise the parameters of the First Amendment of the United States of the Constitution to protect the professor, an accused serial killer. You're the only one that's accusing her, who was not properly investigated. Their motion to dismiss does not meet the legal requirements. It is also unethical, disrespectful, distasteful, and unprofessional. Counterclaimant TikToker requests denial of the motions to dismiss. Counterclaim defendant Rebecca Schofield and her legal counsel suggest dismissing all of the TikToker's counterclaims because they are implausible and legally deficient. TikToker disagrees. She argues that her claims are legally merited, pleaded with particularly, and meet the required legal intent and elements of each claim. Oh, it just goes on and on and on and on and on. We're going to read past her little. All right. The claimant must prove that the defendant communicated information concerning the claimant to others. You did. You posted on TikTok. And the information impugned the honesty, integrity, virtue, and reputation of the claimant. You did that. Expose the claimant to public hatred. Oh, you did that. Contempt and ridicule. And that the information was false. It's false. And that the defendant knew it was false. You stated that it was false. And reasonably should have known that it was false. And the claimant suffered actual injury because of the defamation. Oh boy. It is a fact. Where's your factual basis? That is backed by evidence that the professor and her attorneys issued a multinational press release to news organization that reached billions of people worldwide and published or caused to be published false statements of fact about TikToker. The attorney has been quoted stating that TikToker re-victimizes the families of the slain students, and that TikToker damaged professors' reputation, and that TikToker has continued to make false statements, knowing they are false, and that TikToker used the horrific tragedy of the unaliving of the 4 students for personal gain. And more. Professor also made direct false statements about TikToker in her interview with the Spokesman Review, claiming that TikToker made false statements about her that has no grounding in truth. Well, if that is not a word salad of rehashing, then like you make a statement and then it's true and then there's no okay. And then she talks about where all the news media went. Oh my goodness. The false statements made about TikToker caused her spiritual practice, integrity, intuition, mental health, honesty, and virtue to be unfairly judged, ridiculed, and denounced. Many people, including the news media reporters, assumed the statements made about TikToker were true. She was denounced as a psychic person and as a business. She was subjected to a massive amount of online public harassment, ridicule, judgment, contempt, and hate. She received death threats on email and social media. She was continuously harassed online, receiving thousands of negative comments. Well, I guess Rebecca Schofield, who was the professor, had the same things happen to her because you made these statements against her. Schofield knows that she planned, initiated, and ordered the execution. See, and then here we go again. You continue to do this with no evidence, no factual basis or evidence. And so in this process, the judge has had trials in reference to this, and everything was done online via Zoom. TikToker never had to go to Idaho to face these charges of this defamation lawsuit. Everything was done via Zoom conference. And in this Zoom conference, TikToker made all of these statements, and the judge asked her to back it up. And she said, "Well, it was in the tarot cards that I read." And he's like, "Well, that is not actual evidence. If you have actual evidence of finding that Professor Schofield was involved, where's your factual basis for this information?" And she just kept stating that her tarot cards were the factual basis, and that is her beliefs, and that the judge cannot defame her by stating that these were her beliefs and it's her First Amendment right. And August, she of course brought up religion as well and stated that they were factual based upon First Amendment rights to say whatever you want to say, and to her tarot cards and her spiritual beliefs that the spirits told her that this had happened. All right. So, but she continues to defame her in the papers. TikToker defames the professor in the papers, stated again. She also knows that she had a relationship with Kaylee because she did it. But there's no, so as you can see, you don't have to listen to her TikToks to know what she said. It's all here in these papers that she is directly stating that professor did it. The attorney did not conduct a reasonable inquiry into the truth or falsity of the allegations professor made about TikToker. She accepted statements as fact without reasonable due diligence as professionally required by the model rules of professional conduct. It was her job to know if the statements she made about TikToker in the news media and in the legal documents were true before she filed the case and before she made these statements. The attorney failed this duty. She issued false statements about TikToker to the news media as a strategy to attack TikToker's character, degrade her, embarrass her, discredit her, and humiliate her as a strategy to evade suspicion of professor. Without regard to the truth and the falsity of the statements, she published the false statements about TikToker as direct quotes from herself, not quotes from the professor. And then she goes on to say how she was impacted by these false statements. So let's get to the argument. Let's see. There's 31 pages. We're not going to go over all that because she just rehashes the same thing over and over again. So let's see. She does talk about Brian Koberger here. So let's see this. The attorneys conspired to interfere with TikToker's constitutional rights to due process and the freedom of speech resulting in the action. Counterclaim defendants argue against TikToker's counterclaims, alleging that it is implausible because it isn't race motivated, rely on group pleadings. Their conduct is immune by attorney-client privilege, and TikToker is not a party to Mr. Koberger's case and alleges that TikToker hasn't stated the right type of harm. Counterclaim TikToker disagrees with this counter defendant's argument for the reasons set forth. Oh my goodness. So she's using other statutes to try to. So she's like arguing a whole bunch of different statutes in order to bolster her claim. But she doesn't. She doesn't make any factual basis. She just makes these defamatory statements. In the counterclaims defendant argument in the U.S. District Court, Idaho should adopt advantageous rule, the 10th Circuit, because they think this decision to add race is an element. Okay, I'm gonna skip. Implausible, fantasy-based, dishonest. All right, let's get to, okay, response to the Kohberger argument. This is really good. So, as you know, Brian Kohberger pled guilty to unaliving the 4 University of Idaho students. But on June 27th, 2023, he was still in jail pending a trial. So this is what she has to say to all that. The counter-defendant's actions meet this requirement. The counter-defendants conspired for the purpose of impeding, hindering, obstructing, and defeating investigative efforts in the case of the unaliving of the students to avoid professor from being investigated and charged with the murders. Proper investigation of information and tips as part of the due course of the justice in criminal proceedings. TikToker emailed tips to the FBI tip line about Professor Schofield's motive and role in the murders. She also posted her findings about the details of the murders online. Professor Schofield and her attorneys conspired to hinder and impede upon the investigation of the information TikToker gave to the Moscow police, state police, and federal detectives by discrediting the legitimacy of the TikToker and her information. This is not the behavior of an innocent professor who didn't know the students. It is the aggressive behavior of an overzealous serial killer who deserves to get away with murder. If professor was truly an innocent professor who didn't know the students, professor's tips and criminal investigation wouldn't be a threat. So she's saying her and her attorneys conspired to allow the police not to investigate what was happening. Okay. Sure. Okay. She doesn't say, I know she says stuff about Kohberger, but I can't pinpoint it exactly. She's like, oh, yeah, he's in jail, but she still did it. That's what she said. Yeah, he's still in jail. Yeah, they put it on him, but she did it. But she has no factual basis for her thing except for her tarot cards and the spirits told her. So this is her claim. She's claiming emotional distress. So she's countersuing. All right. All right. So where are we right now? So we know that Brian Kohberger did it. So she filed her lawsuit on the 22nd of December. All the hearings were conducted via Zoom. Remember, TikToker did not go to Idaho to have to defend herself. And remember, she is also defending herself. She's a pro se litigant. Tik Tok Psychic filed a motion to dismiss. I miswrote that. It was denied. She had filed motions to remove the judge. That was denied. She had filed motions to reconsider the dismissal. That was denied. She had filed her counterclaim. That was denied. So the case is in Idaho currently right now, and we'll get so the defamation suit has been solved. The judge said, yes, you have been defamed. TikToker is found guilty of the defamation, and we'll kind of go over that in just a second here. Actually, let's bring this up. All right. This is on June 6th of 2024. This is the judge's order. So this case arises out of the tragedy of the 4 University of Idaho students. The professor is University of Idaho. She alleges that despite never meeting any of these students or being involved in their unaliving, defendant TikToker posted over 100 sensational TikTokers and later YouTube videos falsely claiming that the plaintiff had an extramarital affair, same-sex romantic affair with one of the victims, and ordered the murders to prevent the affair from coming to light. Plaintiffs sent cease and desist letters to the defendant in the following days and weeks. When the defendant did not stop, the plaintiff initiated this action. Plaintiff asserts 2 defamation claims against defendant. One is premised upon the false statements regarding plaintiff's involvement with the murders themselves. The other is premised upon the false statements regarding plaintiff's romantic relationship with one of the unalived victims. Defendant representing herself did not immediately respond to the plaintiff's complaint by January 17th deadline. As a result, pursuant to Rule 55A, plaintiff moved for an entry to default against the defendant on January 19th. A clerk's entry of the default was entered and emailed to the defendant on January 27th. On February 16th, 2023, defendant moved to set aside the entry default. Plaintiff responded the next day, opposing the defendant's efforts to set aside the entry of default and filing a motion for default judgment, Rule 55B. On April 24th, the parties consented to the undersigned jurisdiction. Therefore, on April 26th, the court granted defendant's motion to set aside entry of default, denied plaintiff's motion for default judgment as moot, and ordered defendant to respond to the plaintiff's claim within 21 days. On May 16, 2023, defendant filed her answer, affirmative defenses, and counterclaims to complaint. Within that pleading, defendant denied that she defamed the plaintiff because the accusations made against the plaintiff's defendant's TikTok videos are substantially true. Quote, Rebecca Schofield planned, ordered, and executed the unaliving of the 4 University of Idaho students. Since the accusations in TikTokers' TikTok videos are substantially true, there's no actionable account for defamation. Defendant further maintained that she used her spiritual brain, intuition, spiritual practices, and investigative skills to uncover the truth regarding the unaliving of the 4 University of Idaho students and published her findings on her TikTok social media platform. And in one of the Zoom hearings, the judge asked her, because she said she used her investigative skills, and he asked her what were her investigative skills. Does she have any training? Has she done anything with law enforcement or what have you? What was her training? Of course, she didn't answer that. Defendant also affirmatively asserted 11 counterclaims against both plaintiff and her legal counsel. So remember, I told you that in her countersuit, not only did she countersuit the professor, she countersuited all of the attorneys. So she was suing the attorneys as well. Relying on 2 premises that the plaintiff initiated, planned, and executed the unalivings to cover up the affair she had with one of the unalived victims, and that the plaintiff sought to evade suspicion, or that the unalivings, by conspiring with their counsel to file a frivolous complaint with falsified factual allegations that supported the defamation claims against the defendant and deprived defendant of her constitutional rights. On June 6, 2023, the plaintiff moved to dismiss defendant's counterclaims against her. A week later, plaintiff moved to quash the summons for her counsel, arguing that their issuance was procedurally improper. So by her suing the lawyers was improper. Arguing counsel were not proper parties under the Rule 13 or 14. Defendant opposed each of these motions. In August 8, 2023, memorandum decision and order, the court granted plaintiff's motion to dismiss insofar as it dismissed the defendant's counterclaims against plaintiff and granted plaintiff's motion to quash. On August 21st, 2023, defendant requested that the court, August 8th, 2023, memorandum decision and order to be set aside in rules because this court does not have subject. So, okay. She was saying that the Idaho court didn't have jurisdiction. She was just throwing everything against the wall. I want to say that she's not stupid, but, this is, it's pretty clever of her to make these arguments, but they had no merit. The court does not have subject matter jurisdiction over the action. This court does not have personal jurisdiction over her. Venue is improper. It's in Idaho. She lives in Texas. The court lacks judicial impartiality, and the court does not have subject matter jurisdiction over the plausibility of spiritual practices. That's right. So we're going to say this again. The court does not have subject matter jurisdiction over the plausibility of spiritual practices. I don't know that there's a law stated in plausibility of spiritual practices. According to the defendant, the same reasons similarly warranted the dismissal of the plaintiff's complaint under these rules. The court denied the defendant's motion in its entirety. In the interim, plaintiff moved for partial summary judgment as to liability of each of her two defamation claims against the defendant. Plaintiff's argument in the respects were largely based on the defendant's complete failure to respond to the plaintiff's earlier served requests for admission. Oh, my nose itches, sorry. Defendant eventually responded to the plaintiff's request for admission on January 12, 2024. Plaintiff filed the at-issue amended motion for partial summary judgment, again moving the court for partial summary judgment as to the liability of each of her defamation claims against the defendant. Plaintiff contends that the defendant's submissions, the TikTok videos that the defendant posted online, and the plaintiff's own declaration established beyond dispute that the defendant defamed her. On January 12, 2024, plaintiff filed the at-issue motion for leave to amend the complaint to add punitive damages. She contends that the defendant repeated and ongoing defamatory statements about her without any factual support whatsoever are extreme, outrageous, and warrant a claim of punitive damages. Defendant opposes each one of these motions, claiming again that her statements about the plaintiff are either true or have not been proven false by the plaintiff. That's right. So she's claiming that the professor has to prove to the court that they were false. On April 16th, 2024, the court heard oral arguments on the plaintiff's pending motions for the reasons discussed below. These motions are granted. A motion for summary judgment. Summary judgment is inappropriate where a party demonstrates that as to any claim there is to genuine dispute as to material fact and to motivant is entitled judgment as a matter of law. The moving party bears the initial burden of demonstrating the absence of the genuine dispute as a material fact. If the moving party satisfies the initial burden, the burden then shifts to the non-moving party to demonstrate with specific facts, not mere conclusory allegations, the existence of a genuine issue of material fact. The existence of a scintilla of evidence in support of the non-moving party's position is insufficient, meaning she has no evidence to support her claims. TikToker has no evidence to support her claims. Punitive damage claim is substantive in nature and accordingly controlled by the Idaho law in diversity cases. To support an award for punitive damages at trial, the claimant must prove by a clear and convincing evidence oppressive, fraudulent, malicious, and outrageous conduct by the party against whom the claim for punitive damages is asserted. Putting these standards together, a plaintiff may add a claim for punitive damages only if they establish a reasonable likelihood of proving by clear and convincing evidence that the defendant's conduct was oppressive, fraudulent, malicious, or outrageous. In determining whether to permit a claim for punitive damages, a court reviews all evidence in the movant's favor without assessing credibility or resolving factual disputes and asks whether a reasonable jury could award punitive damages. We're going to skip that. All right, analysis. Plaintiff asserts two defamation claims against defendant. The first claim concerns defendant's statements the plaintiff orchestrated the unalivings of the University of Idaho students. The second claim concerns defendant's statements that plaintiff had been involved in an inappropriate same-sex relationship. In Idaho, a plaintiff claiming defamation must prove that the defendant communicated concerning the plaintiff, sorry, must prove that the defendant communicated information concerning the plaintiff to others, that the information was defamatory, that the plaintiff was damaged because of the communication. The parties mostly agree that this is the standard applicable to the plaintiff's defamation case against defendant. The court agrees. I'm trying to skim it so we don't have to read the whole thing. These social media postings continued even after the defendant received plaintiff's cease and desist letters. The defendant knew that the Moscow Police Department issued a press release confirming that the plaintiff was not involved in the murders. Oh, I forgot to say that. Since TikToker was making all of these defamatory statements, the Moscow Police Department actually put out an actual statement claiming that she, the professor, was not involved, nor was JD, but they didn't state his name specifically. They just made like an overall claim. Department issued a press release confirming the plaintiff was not involved in the unalivings and that another individual, Brian Koberger, was arrested and charged with the unalivings. Oh, and these are the TikToks where she stated these things. November 25th, November 26th, November 28th, November 28th, December 1st, December 2nd, December 5th, December 5th, December 13th, February 8th, June 8th, October 14th. So she continues to do this. By repeatedly accusing the plaintiff of an affair with the student and the ordering of the unaliving to cover up the affair, defendant communicated information to others that was defamatory. Indeed, these statements are defamatory per se, meaning they are actionable without proof of special damages. If an alleged defamatory statement does not fall within one of these categories, a plaintiff must allege and prove that some of the special harm resulted from the utterance. Defendant's statements about how the plaintiff unalived the 4 students and had a secret relationship with one of the victims is in violation of school policy, clearly met this criteria. They impute not only the conduct consisting of the criminal offense that they would be punishable by imprisonment, murder, and related criminal offense, but also ascribe conduct that is incompatible with the proper conduct of a university professor, an inappropriate relationship with a student. Critically, in response, defendant does not dispute that she communicated statements about the plaintiff to others or that the statements is false or defamatory. Rather, she argues, as she always has, that her statements about the plaintiff's involvement with Kaylee and the unalivings are true. She has consistently persisted that the statements she's made regarding Schofield's role in the unaliving of the students are substantially true. TikToker adamantly states that the statements she made about the plaintiff are substantially true. In other words, it is legally true that Professor hired an unexperienced hitman to commit the murders of the 4 university students, and is legally true that Schofield had an affair with KG. Defendant therefore asserts that it is the plaintiff's burden to prove that her statements about the professor on her social media postings are false, and the plaintiff has not satisfied this burden of summary judgment. The plaintiff disagrees that her burden to prove falsity, countering that it's the defendant's burden to prove that her statements are true. That's not how it works. All right, so let's get to the end here. Oh, there's something about Koberger. Let's go back and see. Moreover, in response to the plaintiff's subpoena, the University of Idaho confirmed that it has no records of the unaliving students ever being enrolled in a class taught by the plaintiff. Any investigation into the plaintiff having an appropriate relationship with Kaylee, and an investigative into the plaintiff's involvement in the unalivings. So the university responded to this. Finally, there is no indication that the professor has ever been even remotely considered a suspect in the unalivings. This is powerful evidence at the summary judgment stage. It is not only It not only substantiates plaintiff's argument that defendant's statements about her are false, it also highlights the complete lack of any corroborating support for the defendant's statements. In this way, plaintiff has sufficiently demonstrated the absence of a genuine issue of material fact relating to the falsity of defendant's statements about her. This shifts the burden to the defendant to dispute the claim by setting forth facts showing that there is a genuine issue for a trial relating to whether her statements about plaintiffs are actually true. All right. So let's get to the end here. Plaintiff's motion for leave to amend complaint to add punitive damage is granted. Whether defendant actually acted with such a harmful state of mind to support an award of punitive damage is therefore a question for a jury and not the subject of this memorandum decision and order. So it is hereby ordered that the plaintiff's amended motion for partial summary judgment is granted and that the plaintiff's motion for leave to amend the complaint to add punitive damages is granted. So what does that mean? So they initially said, listen, judge, TikToker keeps going back and forth, stating she has no factual basis. Can you please go ahead and just end this? Can we have a decision upon our suit? And he said, yep, finally. He said he gave her a lot of leeway for her to be able to defend herself. And if you go through the pleadings and back and forth, you'll see it's just a word salad of the same thing over and over again, where she uses her TikTok Psychic tarot cards as her defense and that this is why things are true. And she has no actual basis. So the judge went ahead and granted their summary motion. Granted their summary motion. So, and in this, the TikToker also filed a motion in the Koberger case because she wanted to get the information about their investigative tactics, etc. And the judge said that she did it improperly. Judge Hippler, who is the judge in the Koberger case, said she was an improper third-party person coming in looking for information. She is not a party to the proceedings, meaning she's not a lawyer for the defense. She's not a lawyer for the prosecution, so therefore she's not a party to the documents. She then wanted to get a hold of the documents. He asked her to do a FOIA request instead. Well, as the trial hadn't even commenced at this time, there's a gag order. Nobody is getting any documents anyways. All right, so where are we right now? So as I said, the psychic followed her counterclaim for defamation, one of which she claims here that the harassment of TikTokers' families, friends, by way of messages from strangers seeking to have TikToker's son removed from her and to have her committed to a psychiatric facility and to have her arrested. I thought that was interesting in one of her filings. All right, so where are we right now? As we just read the order, the judge went ahead and said, yep, your defamation case is granted. Now they have asked for punitive damages. And so where are we in that case? The punitive damages are going forward. The last motion was filed on October 13th of this year, and the judge ordered a trial to take place. There is going to be a pre-trial conference on February 5th. That is via Zoom, and that's why I put it in there. So TikTok Psychic could attend from Texas, right? Now, the trial for so it is a civil case. There will be a jury, and the jury gets to decide on the punitive damages. So the professor gets to put on how much and how and why TikToker defamed her and how and why it harmed her physically, emotionally, etc., and what those damages are to her that she should be compensated for. TikToker has the ability to respond to this and present evidence in this case of how she wasn't defamed. They also can put on witnesses, etc., psychologists, medical people, etc., to bolster their claim. This is an in-person trial. And when I say that, that means TikToker needs to leave Texas and go to Idaho. They stated that this is going to be in Idaho. TikToker filed a motion and said, no way. I want it here in Texas because this is where I live. The judge said, no, I'm here. This is my case. This is where I am. This is my court. It's going to be here in Idaho. So, is TikToker going to show up for this trial? This is the biggest sort of conundrum question that we have to ask, right? TikToker has been sitting behind her computer with her webcam, giving all this information out. And even in the filings and proceedings and the Zoom calls, she's been camera to camera making these statements. She's never had to come in person. Well, now she's got to pay the piper, right? You say what you say. You've now been accused of defamation. There's an order against you for the things that you said. And so therefore now you have to come in person. So the judge, not only he sent out an order for this, he is setting things up to see whether or not if she's going to come. So there's going to be a pretrial conference via Zoom on the 5th of February. There's going to be an in-person pretrial conference on the 23rd, because if she does come, she is representing herself. He wants to tell her what the procedures are for an in-court trial, what she's allowed to do, what she's not allowed to do. If you hearken back, if you saw the Lori Daybell, she was pro se in one of her trials, I think in Arizona. And, if you're not an attorney, you don't know the rules and the decorum of the court. And you saw many times where she was asking questions and she was doing things that were improper, and the prosecution had to say objection or what have you, and the judge had to admonish her saying, you can't do that, you can't say that, etc. So the judge wants her, the TikToker, to be physically in the courtroom so that he can give her instructions as to what she's allowed to say and what she's not allowed to say, etc. But so the court has found the defendant liable for the defamation and permitted the punitive damage claims to go forward. There's no actual damages awarded just yet. That has to be entered via a jury. That is going to happen in February. Oh, let's go back to this. So I failed to mention this, that the judge then, so there's a pretrial conference on February 23rd, and he set aside 4 days for the trial to happen, starting on the 24th of February. I kid you not. I kid you not. This is it's going to be great. So damages still yet to be determined in the jury hearing. So will the TikToker be on Zoom for the pretrial hearing? Why do I ask this? Well, in researching this for you, I had heard some rumors and speculations that TikToker is no longer in the United States. TikToker is in France. She does have another channel, because I did look it up. She does have another channel. She is talking about the case. And the one thing I looked at, she didn't defame anything. She just talked about it. So will she be on the Zoom for the pretrial hearing? And what will she say? Because this is headed to trial. Will she be in Idaho for the pretrial hearing? So let me know in your comments, will TikToker show up? What do you think is going to happen in this case, based upon some of the facts and the information that I've given to you in the court documents? It is going to be very, very interesting to see what is going to happen, and I am here for it. Now, I don't know if we're going to be able to be on the Zoom call for the federal hearing, or it's at district court. So I'm going to do my best to get a hold of that Zoom call so I can bring it to you to hear exactly what transpires between the judge, the TikToker, and the professor and her attorneys, because it's going to be very interesting. And then stay tuned to whether or not there's going to be a trial. So make sure you like and follow and subscribe if you want to hear more content. Thanks for watching Legalese 123. Catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching Legalese 123. If you like what you saw, please like and subscribe for more content.